Welcome to the Pulse Wave, a podcast where we have conversations with the influencers and change makers that are transforming the face of GovTech. We find out what keeps them motivated and what makes them tick. The Pulse Wave is brought to you by Metronome. We're a digital transformation firm that keeps outcomes above ego. I'm Virgil Virga, your host. So today on the Pulse Wave, I'm very excited. We've got an Army veteran. He was a senior contributor on Kessel Run. He was director of growth for Raft, helped them scale from 30 to 100, went on to become the director of innovation at Clarity. He's now the founder and CEO of Adjective, where he leads a team of pragmatic design leaders and data scientists that provide human-centered analytic solutions that benefit large enterprises and small startups. Everybody, please help me in welcoming Mr. Rob Murtha to the Pulse Wave Thanksgiving special. Mr. Rob Murtha, thanks for being on such a special day. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Virgil. That was a great intro. It's hilarious to kind of relive all of those experiences in one talk track. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing very well as well. I'm a huge holidays guy. So happy Thanksgiving, Rob. I'm curious, what are some of or one of your sort of go-to childhood memories from Thanksgiving?
Folks that don't know, I grew up in Southampton, New York, which is real funny, crazy place. Bunch of movie stars around, bunch of crazy environmental stuff, but people don't realize that there's like a really sweet services underbelly there. And my father was like an entrepreneur, so we owned this like really cool restaurant in Southampton. And but for Thanksgiving, it was like that one kind of anomaly, that one holiday where it was like, hey, let's focus on something else other than the driver's seat, which was the name of his business. And yeah, so I remember just cooking with the folks, hanging out in the kitchen, going outside periodically, throwing the ball around with my brother. We both played football. It's just a blast. I think it's so funny because these holidays, it's like when the cold starts to really move in, especially in the Northeast, and it makes playing outside a little different. So yeah, I feel like that's got to be my favorite childhood memory, is like the outdoor aspect of it and the changing of the seasons.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah, I'm from South Florida. There wasn't many changing of the seasons, but just like you, really just in general, my favorite memories is being around the house. We got a big Italian family and there was cousins and aunts and grandmas and grandpas. And it wasn't just the turkey and the ham. It was turkey and ham and lasagna and seafood and Thanksgiving sides and
I
Italian
love it.
sides. It was
Dude,
a
that's
lot of
insane.
fun.
Seafood for
Absolutely.
Thanksgiving. That's the most Florida thing I've ever heard.
Seafood and Italian food. That's right. Well, I'm very thankful of, my childhood and some of the memories that I bring with me. And I'm curious, Rob, what are you thankful for being in GovTech in 2023?
Oh my goodness, I love this question. I kind of started my GovTech journey in like 2017-ish with the DOJ. And so, thinking back then, my boss at the time, Dave Miller, really awesome dude, still like a mentor today. Thinking back how challenging some of those conversations were to kind of get people to look at problem solving a little differently. That was like an interesting concept even that far back, because everything was so checklist and SOP driven. And I'm not against processes. I'm not against checklists. I think there's a total purpose for them, and it can help accelerate workflows. But you need to couple them with an intentional philosophy, an intentional strategy around like, how are you going to monitor those checklists? How are you going to incorporate those checklists and introduce some kind of real human element to it? And then how are you going to measure the success of kind of those processes you establish? So something as simple as that was like a big barrier, back in 2017. Fast forward to 2023, and everyone's got the process answer, right? Like everyone understands what needs to get optimized. I'm a huge lean practitioner. That's why I'm using that term, so that jargon so fluidly. But I think like the overarching community has grown up so well, and that's kind of what we needed. Even fast forward from the bureau to Kessel Run. When I was at KR, it was kind of like, wow, we're still a startup. We're still like kind of pissing people off here and there. Like, how do we get to a place where people just get it? They're just like, oh yeah, like we want to save money. Oh yeah, we want to like make things simpler, easier. We want to do more with less. Like that mentality just like took so long, and so many like, heated, passionate arguments to kind of get to sink into the larger community. And the the ultimate thing we needed to do was get everyone to see it, right? And I think we're there. So I'm super thankful for that.
So when you go into a new customer now or a new environment and you know that that's what they want, how excited do you get now in that situation, knowing that there's proof cases to where now you're able to go in and help them change their culture and change their environment and help transform them because it's been done?
So right now there's like this kind of the way I interpret modernization programs and their reputations and like how well the approach is done at those transfer to other places is very like ethereal. It's very floaty, right? It's something that you can't just take as a package. We have tactical data to say like, oh yeah, we tried to do that for 2 years, that thing didn't work. But we spent this very little money in this certain segment of it and it was like wicked successful. We ended up, let's say we brownfielded, two apps from this R&D organization, and instead of having to like rebuild them, what's worked in the past, how is it working today, what are some interesting details, and then based on our organization and our ethos and the capacity we have and the assets we have, how do we take the goodness there and apply it to what we're doing here?
You know, I've witnessed you sort of lead some situations, and you're a clear leader. You have this really uncanny ability to have people around you put their guards down.
Making me
And
blush.
so I'm curious, and I always ask this question: is, have you always been like that? And if not, what was it that helped you get to this position to be able to have that effect?
Like honestly, I think that's always been kind of my superpower, and I think what you just described in my ability to see what brings people joy, see what excites people, see where they get their dopamine hits, has always been kind of my superpower. And I think it's because I love people's stories and their journeys. Like I try to love them as much as they do. Like I get as excited about hearing about where people want to go, what they want to do, the experiments they want to run, all the challenges they face, how they're looking to overcome them. Before I get to the army piece, growing up, I mean, playing sports, especially in like, the different, I played a ton of football, compared to wrestling, which is like very kind of, you own your destiny, a little self-centered. Football is like, you need to get as much as you can out of the people to your left and right. And the military is very similar, right? So it's like, you're not going to be able to do it alone. It's a team game. And so, like, regardless of where I end up in life, I think I'm always going to be able to fall back to my enlisted days and my deployments, and even just something as simple as basic training, where it's like you just get absolutely crapped on. And it really reset me and grounded me quite a bit. And so, combine all of those things, I think now I operate with like this, like genuine authenticity and interest in people's like lives, their goals, their journeys, that like it's really easy for me to have like an objective conversation with them about what's valuable for them, what they're trying to do, and what might not be. So I think that's well received.
So, talking
Well,
about being good at things,
yeah,
clearly you're extremely passionate and amazing when you just talk about design. Have you always been had this design mindset?
I've always been really really interested in design. I'm like a total design nerd. I collect a bunch of art. And in addition to that, I love behavioral psychology. So in the army, I was like an intelligence analyst, and I still have this like hypothesis that like someday there will be a very rich pipeline of like intel analysts in the military, that get pipelined into design focused responsibilities, or data annotation slash design focused responsibilities, because the philosophy is very similar. But yeah, I mean, honestly, like I love to take a problem and slice it apart in the most feasible way. Like there's an element to design where it's like, how well does this work for people? So I don't start with the processes, start with the philosophy. I like look at the situation and then roll back to structure and things that will work to get us there. And part of that is like, I'd say the area that I've grown up the most in design is applying like lean methodologies to it. So like, how can I do the simplest thing that will be consumable, purchasable, adoptable the fastest? And then from there, keep like layering capability on. I try to like push that as long as we're successful. That success is going to inspire people, and then we're going to be able to completely continue to layer on goodness and get like a bunch of buy-in from folks. And that's the goal of design at the end of the day, in my opinion, is to get things adopted by users, and in turn they're receiving joy from using the products.
So conversely, without design and design thinking, what's the byproduct of that?
What happens if you don't have design thinking? What happens if you don't have a designer? Immediately, I think there's a ton of risk that gets introduced, right? You might not have the bandwidth or the team size to include a designer today, but at least incorporate some DIY design thinking, understand the processes, bake in some structure that helps de-risk the way you organize stuff if you don't have a designer. And there's different t-shirt sizes for how you implement design into your organization. And so to me, it starts with DIY design, like bring in a designer, bring in someone who's mature enough that they could like apply design thinking to your team to think that way so your product doesn't just go off the rails. The next stage is like consider design ops. If you have multiple teams and you don't want to embed a designer all over the place, have a centralized design resource. And it could either be a person or a pair, but they're working for all your product teams, including help desk, including back office teams. Like I'm always all for having a designer per team, but I just like any other kind of system, I love to do it incrementally. But yeah, I think if you don't have a designer, if you don't have that design kind of perspective for your organization, there's just a crap ton of risk. Nobody is charting stuff. Like one of the beautiful things about design is you can like throw together a quick prototype and throw it in front of somebody and articulate what like the experience would be like for end users and customers versus just like a conversational deck that's very hollow, very topical. I think you could just get to the meat so much cheaper and faster when you have a designer that's on your team.
I love that. So right now you're locked in on adjective,
I am.
and where are you headed with adjective? What gets you excited?
I'll kind of give the overview and see what people think. And in the comments, it'll be fun if people respond or reach out or whatever. But, I've been on this like mission to make UX kind of more consumable and less isolated to product culture, less isolated to technology, less isolated to kind of Silicon Valley. And so I've really been trying to find, and in addition to that, I want to come up with a way to, there's this like term called, productizing services where it's like more fixed price, just more kind of straightforward of a transaction. If you can find something that's repeatable and valuable enough for people to just like kind of purchase and kind of just, use as needed. And so I've been on this journey to try to see how I can do that with UX. And I've gone down some interesting pathways where it's like, case studies, RFI support, like rapid prototyping, like Figma prototypes for like really lean ideas. Someone drops a statement in there and you give them this like entire like world of what they might want to see that they could potentially raise money with via like a pitch deck or something. And then also I've considered, boutique digital services, just focusing on like the design element and being just like the design, Jedis that augment ourselves to teams and kind of help guide their path, like we talked about earlier. So I'm kind of in this balanced area right now. I've had a number of engagements so far, a good sampling. Most of them have been like startups or private sector, doing some work with the government, which has been really valuable as well. But it's tricky. I'd say we're still trying to like refine that. I think we're probably 70% of the way there with like the experimentation we've done thus far. One thing that's really fun for the community, I think there's an opportunity to pull a design up to the enterprise level, and I know people have done this, and I think it's one of the things that made me more valuable at like Raft and Clarity was just like operating and coming some of these like more stuffier executive roles, being able to apply design thinking, being able to think like our product practitioners has gone a really long way for bid submissions and interacting with stakeholders and just being able to get tactical with them. But there's other areas I think at enterprise levels or at like the business layer that design can be applied. And one of my assumptions is that like for private equity and even venture capital, so like when you invest in a company, a situation, I think too many, I've heard this before, like so many times in the past, product market fit is like one of the big criteria. And then obviously they look at the financials. But, from what I've experienced just orbiting the environment is like there may not be enough put on like qualifying and qualifying founders, like founder product fit. And I think that's a huge one because like the market's always going to be chaotic, and it's been more chaotic than it's ever been in the last 5 years. What's not going to be chaotic is a resilient founder that's going to be able to pivot a product or pivot a company towards a successful outcome. And I think there's an opportunity to use user experience and design thinking and those types of methodologies to kind of build a profile, to extract data, to answer questions, to make people feel more confident in the teams that they invest in.
Absolutely. It's clear that design thinking and the ability to, design through a vision is important, because I feel like I have the capability to have a vision, and working with folks like yourself and other designers that I've had an opportunity to work with, it's clear that that marriage between those two things is something that's really potent. So I can
Absolutely.
appreciate that. So
You know,
this is where it leads me to here, Rob, to the most exciting part of this entire Pulse Wave podcast. Here we
dude, I
are at
love
the
it.
Pulse Check. The
Let's
Pulse
do it.
Check is
Let's
where
do
I
it.
ask you three quick questions and you answer those with a song name. Question number one: how focused are designers on the actual human experience?
I think a good way to describe human experiences is they're very flexible and fluid. I would say it makes me think of the song "The Distance" by Cake,
Oh, good
because
one.
every experience is something very like iterative and you know extensive and flexible. It's not always going to be perfect end to end. That's obviously the goal, but I think that's the way that designers interpret like constantly managing these experiences and platforms to serve their users and customers.
I love it. Cake, one of my favorite bands. Question number two: what's your general level of confidence?
This one's going to be silly because the character is like controversial and wacky, but I guess "I Am a God" by Kanye. Back when he was a little more grounded. I think that's like a hilarious song title for that response, and he's just like a wild man. So um, I
What an
feel like
artist.
that's
What an
he's an
artist.
artist. That's yeah, he's an artist. He's
Number
an
three:
artist.
how do you feel on holiday mornings with the wife and kids around?
I don't know why it's coming to mind, but Coolio's "Gangster Paradise," which is hilarious because I feel like the thing that makes me feel most successful is like having such an incredible family. Like they're my homies. Like got married super young to Shanice, my wife. We got married at 18, been together forever, just so happy and still have a ton of fire, just really, really happy. And then our kids are just rock stars. They're super compassionate, self-aware. Like it's just a great situation. And then you wrap that with the holiday morning where you're kind of less focused on things outside of your family. And it's like, dude, I'm a legit gangster.
I love it. The Murthas
Dude, the
in the
Murphas.
holidays, living in
Yep.
a gangster's paradise.
Heck
Rob
yeah.
Murtha, happy Thanksgiving. Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you being on the Pulse Wave Thanksgiving special, for being such a great sport and a great guy. And we'll see you around, brother.
This is amazing. Thank you so much for having me on. This is a blast. So
Thank you,
thank
Rob.
you.
Appreciate it. Take care and happy Thanksgiving.
All right. Happy Thanksgiving.